Greetings sailors and welcome to a viewer warships replay, this time courtesy of Abdullah the Tanker, who is in one of the tier 9 German supercruisers, the, I think, Ägir? I'm not entirely certain, but I think that's how it's pronounced. I mean, it's an Old Norse word, so, you know, who's going to correct me, I suppose. Now this is distinct from the Siegfried in the choice of guns available, but there are a couple of other differences between them in terms of, I think, the secondary battery and the AA armament as well. But it mainly is the main battery that is the distinctive feature. So this has got, 9 12-inch guns, and the other one has got 15-inch guns in, I think, twin turrets. Is it 6? Yeah, it's 6 15-inch guns. So it has meteor guns, but fewer of them, and a worse reload to go with it. Both of them do feature hydro and torpedoes, though. That's exactly what Abdullah is making use of here. And that's going to turn out to be useful, as we'll see in just a second, because there's a bunch of torpedoes. And it could be... well, it has to be the Benim, because the other destroyer has already been spotted on the other flank. I think that got flashed by the Alaska's radar. So he knows exactly what he's dealing with, and it's rather a dangerous opponent just because of the sheer number and the rate of reload of its torpedoes. But nonetheless, as his hydro is active, he's clearly decided he's going to go for it, which is a very aggressive move indeed, a bold move, one might even say. Because, of course, the Hydra does have a good range, but it's not just this destroyer he's dealing with, it's also the teammates who are on the flank. But he's decided to go for it, and, well, there they are in Hydro range. And that's close enough for his secondaries to open up as well. I don't think he's particularly gone for a secondary spec here. He just seems to have the kind of default-ish secondary range. I can't even remember what that is offhand. But yeah, he doesn't seem to be opening up his secondaries at things at very long ranges, which this can do. You can build it for secondaries, but I don't know. That's up to the individual player whether they do that or not. I don't know why I would recommend it for this. Something like the Odin, maybe. So anyway, it's actually the Yugamo who finishes them off with their guns, but that being a Benim, of course, even though they've already put torps out against him and put torps in the other direction, there's even more torpedoes yet. But fortunately, he is able to avoid taking them, but it comes very close to taking one of them in the bow, though. A single Benim torp wouldn't have been that big a deal. It's heavy damage. And also, it's the kind of thing where it might bite you in the ass later on, where you come down to having low health. So, yeah, we'll keep an eye on that. That's what we call foreshadowing, by the way. Just a little, you know, little pro thingy tip there from a professional such as myself. Yeah. You might have noticed, by the way, I should point this out now while I remember, this is 30 FPS recording, because in the current patch 0.9.8 there's been some really horrendous FPS problems to the point even where sometimes it drops down below 20, whereas previously it would hum along quite happily at the capped maximum, which is like 76 or 77. So they've done something, and particularly with the smoke effects, it seems to really have an issue. So rather than record it at 50 and have it be constantly dipping under 50 FPS, I've decided to record it at 30. But even so, sometimes it is definitely a bit on the stuttery side. There's really not a lot I can do about that. That's purely just a graphical problem with this patch. Lots of people have had this issue. It doesn't seem to be necessarily a universal issue, but yeah, certainly there's something in the graphics somewhere which is causing these big FPS drops. Anyway, nice chunky hit into that Algerie. 2 Citadels. These are still fairly substantial guns for a cruiser. And it looks like they've got this flank fairly locked down. The other team actually lost their other destroyer as well, so they do have now the only destroyer left alive. But the enemy team does also have radar still. So it's not an unequaled advantage, as it were. It's just... it's nice when you've got a destroyer left and the enemy team doesn't. It does then depend how good that surviving destroyer is, I suppose, but we'll see. So for now, this isn't at all a bad position, but it's not going to last forever. There's still quite a few ships there, and that Scharnhorst B is rapidly losing hit points. And so although Abdullah has got this nice cross-firing position for now, the moment that Scharnhorst goes down, and there they are, they've basically been fired at by everything on this flank, that means that everyone's now going to turn their attention on him. And this is a bit of a tricky situation, actually, because there's still a fair few ships there. Some of them have got some decent health. And he can't really just charge out into them, because then the exact same will happen to him. So he's got to play it quite cautious here and hope that his back is secure for now. But that's not maybe looking so great either, because the enemy team is now starting to push that... is it the C cap? B cap? The other mid cap, anyway. So he's getting a bit of cover behind this island, and that limits what can shoot at him. But unfortunately for this Yugumo, the enemy Alaska's just pinged their radar, and I think the Yugumo could have slowed down in time there. In fact, I think they could have literally used Abdullah to bring themselves to a sudden halt, and instead they wiggle past out into the open in front of all these ships, who suddenly are very interested in killing this remaining destroyer, and having that destroyer left alive could have been a real advantage for them. But alas, no, for some reason the Yugumo decided it was a good plan to rush out like that, when they could have instead stayed behind an island and had some cover, wait for the radar to go out. Now we're another ship down. That's a bit of a problem, because we've also lost the Fiji. That was in the B cap, and now it's Abdullah taking the brunt of all this attention. He's possibly going to get shot in the back if he's bogged down here for too long. The only bright side is he's got the Cleveland helping him still, and the Alaska has come over to this flank also. I'm not entirely sure why. They did start over on the other side, and maybe they thought this flank needed some help, which, to be fair, it probably does at this point, and they might take some of the heat off. But they're not really coming down to where Abdullah is. They're going to the north of that bigger island, and so they might get to shoot at the Zara, but there's nothing they can immediately do to help right now. So Abdullah backing up a little bit. The Colorado's guns are still a problem. Everything's guns are still a problem, but those are the biggest guns. Those are the guns that could punch the Rizama most easily. And unfortunately he just lost the Cleveland as well, but the Cleveland at least killed that low health Alaska into the bargain. Abdullah's own health is not looking good right now, though. That Hipper's AP has done a number on his upper belt. And now he's starting to take some fire from behind, so yeah, this isn't a tenable position any longer. So there's the Colorado, who is burning, very low health, gets the kill. Not before they don't get some shells off themselves, although only one actually does any damage, but still, he's not got a lot of health left right now, and he knows full well that the Hipper's got torps just as he has. Doesn't have a hydro left, but there's about to be a bit of a plot twist, because although he does get a chance to shoot his guns, it's only really going to be at the superstructure. Does a bit of damage, not a lot, and then that happens. Turns out the dead Zara had dropped torps from behind where that Hipper was, and those Italian cruiser torps are quite slow, and so Abdullah was, in fact, saved by the enemy Zara. Like I said, bit of a plot twist. So 2 caps apiece. They are 2 versus 4 with the death of their Nelson, but fortunately that Savetsky Sawyers is rather low health. There's also a cruiser and another 2 battleships that we haven't really seen since they were spotted in the south. And indeed, there's one of them that got spotted just now, the Leon, who is very healthy. And you're actually going to see in a bit somebody complaining in the chat about those 2 remaining battleships, the Bismarck and the Leon, who have been apparently just kind of hanging back, not doing that much, just firing from range and letting all their teammates take the hits. So we've come down to a very close situation. This Alaska does have a decent amount of health though. Abdullah himself is about to get his last heal back, but he really needs the Alaska to do some of the tanking for him here. And fortunately for him, the Alaska bow-on is actually quite a tanky cruiser. It's also got very good guns, so between them they can definitely finish off the Sovietsky Soyuz. But after that point, it sort of depends on the quality of those remaining 2 battleships and the Seattle. And they're going to have to work together a bit here as well. If they both decide to suddenly go off and do different things, well, it's especially going to be bad for Abdullah, because he's been able to heal back up to over 20k hit points, but that's not all that much in the scheme of things. And the Alaska, I mean, both of them don't, they're both supercruisers, both of them don't have a particularly fast rate of fire. So against battleships especially, they're not just going to be able to kite away and burn them down or anything like that in an especially effective manner when they're the only 2 left. So they really do have to work together and try and take down these remaining few ships, and I think the Alaska's actually waiting for Abdullah to catch up here rather than just plough out face first themselves. So not great in terms of damage from the I've forgotten how I pronounced it already, the Ägir. Ägir? I completely forgot. I did look up to try and how to pronounce it, but there's not a lot of pronunciation guides for Old Norse apparently. So yeah, anyway, the Alaska's guns doing a lot more work than his super heavy cruiser AP being rather effective. And I think that Alaska might have radio location as well, because they're going to ping the map in a second as to whether they think another ship is, and they've both got a hydro going at the moment, so they're close enough to the other side of this island they'll get detected, because magically that's how hydro works in this game. It can go through islands just as radar can. But yeah, I think the Alaska must have had a rough idea anyway, because as it turns out, it's the Bismarck that's there, who's very nearly full hit points. Okay. Now, miraculously, both of Abdullah's torpedo tubes are still intact. Usually by this point in a game, if you've taken this much of a battering, one or both of them may well have been knocked out. Torpedo tubes are one of the more fragile modules that you have on your ship, along with light AA mounts. They tend to get stripped by high explosive quite easily. In this case, however, because he did have them, he was able to get the torps out, he was able to top up his damage quite nicely, and as a bonus, the Bismarck wasn't even firing at him. And Abdullah was in a tricky position there. He couldn't go too far forwards without giving flat broadside to one or the other, but his angle versus the Bismarck was by far the worst, and the Bismarck, of course, has bigger guns than the Leon. But yeah, as it turned out, Bismarck wasn't firing at him, the Bismarck was firing at the Alaska, and so although he's about to get to very low health, as long as the Leon doesn't get to fire at him again, he should be okay, and he's actually trying very hard to stay in the cover of this island and just waiting for the opportunity to maybe drop his other set of torps. So there's the Alaska's radar, and I think their hydro must be on cooldown as well, because they pinged hydro not long after Abdullah did. So it looks like the Leon is going to make things easy for him. He's sort of turning away, but he's not manoeuvring particularly hard. I mean, it's not like he was angling particularly well anyway. The Leon's setup with its turrets mean that if you want to get all your guns on target, you have to show rather a lot of broadside to do it, but when you've got nasty supercruiser guns facing you and you're bottom tier, that's not necessarily the wisest thing to do. So the Alaska's taking the brunt of it, and the Leon's secondaries are pinging away. The Leon, for some reason, not firing HE. In fact, if they had been firing HE, I think Abdullah would have been considerably worse off than he is now. In fact, he might even have died to the Leon's HE, just because of the sheer number of shells the Leon could put out. But as it turned out, nope, they were firing AP against things that could resist, and torpedoes find the mark, and so Abdullah ended that game with 169,000 damage, high caliber, a dreadnought, and a Confederate medal as well. I don't have the full score screens, unfortunately. I just have the replay site end plate there for you, so I don't know exactly how much XP that would have netted both him and the Alaska, but easily over 2k base XP with a game like that, I would think, easily. So that's it for this replay. Hopefully you've enjoyed it, and if you have, you can do all the usual things down underneath the video, and of course, as always, stay tuned for more.